Feels like I'm getting into a pilot seat of some kind. I clap to start.
I know. Clap, clap. Okay. Now, you got your food. I've got my tea. I'm still waiting for it to brew. Here's what I want to talk about today, because this is the sub-theme going on right now. And I will mention the word, we'll probably mention it more than once. I'm tired of talking about shadow, but because shadow is coming up for humanity this year, in particular in 2023, what's the underlying aspect of this shadow? It's like, it's so clear to me. It's so clear. We just gave one of our patrons her monthly astrology life coaching consult. What's the underlying theme for that? You were actually talking to me about your TikToks and your ski mask. I'm like, what's the underlying theme of that? I'm talking about one of my current businesses, and there's this shadow aspect of it. What's the underlying theme? The underlying theme is a fear of self-acceptance, not accepting yourself, not seeing yourself from outside of the ego. It's something that came up in our consult when you were asking if there was a filter on the screen. And I'm like, oh, if there was a filter on the screen, you wouldn't be able to see all my wrinkles and everything. That's that's what it is. When we're perceiving through ego, there's nitpicking, there's I'm not comfortable with myself, I don't like aspects of I'm a people pleaser. We just heard that. Oh, I don't really want to say anything. I don't want to rock the boat. All of that comes from a fear, number one, of accepting all aspects of yourself. Something that I learned to do finally by the time, I would say that I was probably about 47, 48 years old, which is, it's been a while now. Happily, I wouldn't go back to that again. That, people, here are the themes that I've heard my whole life. Besides the really positive ones, of course, oh my gosh, you have so much energy. I love your energy. I love your energy. I've heard that from everybody. Oh, I just love your energy. Until you're around me long enough, mm-hmm. And then maybe you're like, wow, you're a lot. I don't know if I can keep up with that energy, because I'm a lot to keep up with. But the things that have been mirrored back to me that I literally had to go, okay, I'm going to hear that. And first of all, I have to accept it. This is the same aspects of what we just shared in the last episode about the process of accepting shadow or seeing shadow. But this is the same thing with yourself, because the ego does show us the shadow in many ways. Sonia, you're so intense. Oh my gosh. I'm so intense for them. You're too much. You're so dramatic. My parents, you're so dramatic. Oh my gosh, you said that so dramatically. You have so much drama. Well, it's a good thing that I had a theater career then, isn't it? I turned all of these things of you're so intense, you talk too much, diarrhea of the mouth. Where did I get that from? Somebody said that to me. That was very painful to my ego to hear from some smarmy dude, long time ago. Oh, you know what? You have diarrhea of the mouth. And I was like so pained by that. And so, of course, the ego will deflect that. The ego will try to escape. And the way that I decided that I was going to shift that was, first of all, to accept what I was hearing. You're so intense. You're really over the top. You're really dramatic. You're super theatrical. Oh my God, you're so dramatic. You said that so big. On and on and oh, you're so serious. I'm like, well, what am I? Am I so dramatic or am I so serious? You're so serious. Or when I used to do the flip thing, that I would flip it and then I would get asked this, are you okay? You're so quiet. I would just, and I'm like, I do have quiet moments. I don't always have diarrhea of the mouth. There were all of these extreme feedbacks, echoes to me. And it was, I had to learn to love both of these extreme sides of myself because it was being mirrored back to me from the time I was really little. So it was in my upper mid 40s where I finally said, you know what? I'm going to answer that with humor. I'm going to totally accept that to others, I'm very intense. I love my intensity. That I'm so dramatic and theatrical. I love being dramatic. It makes life a lot spicier. It's a lot of fun. I'm so serious. Well, I have serious moments. Like, that's good to have serious moments. Diarrhea of the mouth. Okay, but I like sharing my thoughts. It's a Gemini thing. It's a Gemini Virgo thing to share all your thoughts. And then I decided I was going to answer that or meet that with humor. Somebody has to be dramatic. That's how Source desires to learn through me. I'm intense. Yeah, I'm the sun. The sun is intense, but you don't complain about the sun always being there. And you know what? You would be lost without the sun. If I wasn't on this planet, what would this planet be like? It's necessary for me to be this intense. It's necessary for me to talk so much. It's not. Somebody needs to have all these ideas and communicate them. Geminis make great writers. Blah, 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 blah. So I would meet it with humor. And when I did that repeatedly for years, suddenly this balance started to come in. It was very interesting. And I then, because very few people like watching themselves on video or on camera, or very few people like their pictures, their images. I was definitely in that same camp. This process of kind of making fun of my own personality traits when people would point them out to me, that neutralized that. Number one. But number two, the side effect of that was I began enjoying looking at myself on video and on camera in my images. And I started to see different aspects of myself with humor. And then I was like, oh, hey, I actually look really good here. Or especially when I look back at my photos. And then I'm like, why was I so hard on myself? I actually looked really good in that picture. Wow. Like, I'm really hard on myself. I got to stop that. I have to just like lighten up and enjoy this and just like become really comfortable with myself. That's what the theme of this is. What I'm sharing with you is become comfortable with yourself. What is it going to take for you to become comfortable with yourself? I can now say very happily, with an open heart, that I'm very comfortable with myself. I'm comfortable with my body. I'm comfortable with its perfections and imperfections. I'm comfortable with my personality, with its extremes. I'm comfortable with like what I put out there. I'm really comfortable with that. I also have learned to take the pause. Something that we talk about every once in a while. How important it is especially when you're with others and you're getting mirrored back, pause and sit in it. Sit in the silence of the mirror reflection of another so that you can allow that echo back of what you put out there. If they respond to you, you can sit with it and you can become very comfortable and loving with what you see about yourself and another. Because you're sharing with me your ski mask and you're trying to find, like, you've changed your name of your social media.
It's tough. I'm still working on it. So this is not something that I feel like I really should be talking a lot about in terms of like where I am right now. I find that when I talk about my progress with these things, it can overinflate my ego. My ego is something that I need to balance. For me, what I'm finding over a long process of trial and error, which really isn't that long in the scheme of things, I'm only 26, but through this process of trial and error, I'm finding that in order to become comfortable with myself, I have to find this balance. It is a balance of understanding what it is that I need to change about myself in order to be the person that I want to be, and what it is that already exists that doesn't need to be changed, that actually should be strengthened and reinforced. And so I am finding through all of my work that I have certain qualities that are very, very beneficial for me, and enhancing those qualities can feel uncomfortable. And it's that uncomfortability that I choose to then step into. Then there are certain qualities about myself that, when I think about them, they kind of make the ego happy, or the ego likes to spend a lot of time in those qualities. I find that those qualities can be more negative and actually harm my ability to make progress and change. And so, for example, I have a lot of issue, I have had a lot of issue in the past in, I guess, really just being like committed to myself, in committing to becoming the person that I want to be. I don't really want to talk about specifics, because I feel like if I talk about specifics, then it goes too far. The pendulum tips, and then my ego starts to revel in my progress. And it says, you've done so good, you're so amazing. And then I spend all my time in my head dreaming about how good I've done, and I don't take action on it. So I don't want to talk about too much about the details.
It's so funny to me to hear you, like, because, you know, you're my son. And so to hear your self-awareness, and I'll default to astrology here, how we were just talking about this before we started recording, how the Aquarius will support the Aries in your chart, and it'll just bring it up, out and out. Your self-awareness of this is amazing, and it's really key. And yeah, you are young. You're only 26 years old, and for you to have this level of self-awareness is awesome. And I will give myself the parental pat on the back.
Yeah, I'll give you a pat on the back for that too. Absolutely.
Because we are such a verbal, communicative, psychoanalytical, spiritually reflective family, and this starts, and I will give Nana and Papa the parental pats on the back on that one too. Papa, Dad, Nana, Mom, because they started it. They started it, and they had to change it in their family, because their family didn't talk about anything of meaning. Their family are always just talking about surface garbage, and they got tired of it. And I witnessed that growing up, seeing my relatives from time to time. And Nana would go, nobody's ever talking about anything of substance.
How very Scorpio of her.
so Scorpio. That's totally hilarious, too.
Yeah.
That is so true. She's so the epitome of a double Scorpio. She just wants to dive deep, and then her Cancer rising. Oh, let's talk about that poor motherless child over there.
Mm-hmm.
That's her line, the poor motherless child.
Yeah.
And it's like, they just need some nurturing. Let's empathize for a moment. Everybody, can we just sit and feel, and just let's have a tear for that. Oh, that's why she's acting like an absolute psycho. She's just a poor... This is how she felt about Charles Manson. That's why she had the book on him, is because he was just a poor motherless child to her.
Sure.
Also a fellow Scorpio. But anyway, they always wanted to study human behavior and figure out why people behave the way that they do, because they genuinely always want, and still do, even in her early demented state, they want to help people. They genuinely care about people. They really want people to be happy and to be together. And it's so interesting to see that, and how I took that and really ran with it with you three. I have always been working on myself. Even because I was raised by them, even as a small child, I became very aware of how people saw me, because I kept getting that verbal feedback from people. I would get that verbal feedback, especially from my family. especially, and of course this is a sibling thing, and I'm rolling my eyes because it's still that my inner child's just like, oh my God. Like I had to listen to my brother and sister bitch about me, complain about me, being the youngest, and Nana and I were always just like, what are you talking about? Like she gets all your hand-me-downs. You're not, Michael would say, oh, Sonia, you're so spoiled. What? I'm wearing your pants from 3 years ago. How could that be spoiled? You're the oldest child and the only son, and they bought a piano for you, and they did this for you, and I'm just getting the leftovers. So, I would hear those kind of comments, and I was always working on being as self-aware as possible, and it really bothered me when the extremes of my personality would come out, and it would have a really negative effect. I was very bothered.
Oh yeah, me too. I can't stand. I couldn't stand because it doesn't. I've gotten a lot better at mitigating it. But I remember when I used to snap at people, and I absolutely despised the feeling that arose from that. I absolutely hated hitting people, but I used to do that quite often. And
physically hit?
Yeah, absolutely.
You didn't do that in our household, so that's
I hit Mars and Kyan.
Well, you hit Kyan. I don't remember you hitting Mars, but Kyan would come to me then and say, "Go, baby." Mm-hmm. And but that's a sibling thing to do. Kids do that.
I'm not so dismissing of that. I think that it's indicative of a growing, changing personality. But that doesn't mean that growth doesn't have like a negative impact on the person that is
I'm not
being
dismissing
hit.
That though.
Yeah, I'm not gonna just say, oh, he was just. I'm not gonna poor motherless child that statement.
No, you guys were never poor motherless children at all. You grew up with two.
But mothers. so what I found though is that I would get into like fights at school and stuff.
Mm-hmm. I know you and Stefan on the bus. That was definitely you played that off.
That was often.
The victim, but
I fought
definitely
Marcus like a couple times. He didn't really even fight back. That was just unfortunate. That was really sad.
Marcus would probably go. Marcus, if you're listening to this, Marcus Anderson, he would probably go, "Oh, buddy."
He was
okay.
He
was such a sweetie.
He said at one point he was like, "What the hell, man?" That was such like a Marcus thing to say.
I love Marcus. What a cutie.
There was this one time that I snapped at this kid. This is probably one of the last times I've ever did this. I pretty much stopped doing that. Well, I stopped doing this entirely after 7th grade. 7th grade was the last time that I really ever actually got into a physical altercation with somebody. And by the way, it wasn't like I was really causing a lot of physical damage. I was pretty small and scrawny and I didn't know how to punch. So I would just kind of hit with the ends of my fists like this. So I wasn't really doing, but it was it's emotionally traumatizing to people to do that kind of stuff to them. And a lot of times I feel like for a lot of people, they didn't know what was going on inside of me and I didn't have the self-awareness to recognize that all of these emotions that I was bottling up, they weren't connected. They weren't connected to all of these other people. It would just be that I would interpret something that they did as a trigger, and then all my inner rage, whether it be about the marriage or whatever was going on in my life, all that would come out. I know. This kid named Willow that I think he might have been autistic.
Oh, really? Yeah. You hit him?
Yeah. I hit him. I hit him really hard. I hit him a lot. And one time in this one day and he was an easy target too. He was picked on a lot, and so it was. I think we were trying to go down a slide or something like that, and he didn't even really push me, but
I remember that kid.
Literally, I think I remember in my head I made the conscious choice. In his enthusiasm to go down the slide, I think he brushed past me and I got a burn on my arm from the slide, and I just decided to take that minor transgression out on him, and I grabbed him by his shirt and I was just hitting him a ton, and he started crying and I ran away because I didn't want to deal with the pain. I didn't want to deal with the repercussions of that, which is a very common behavior for me. I didn't want to deal with the repercussions, so I'd run away. I got very good at avoiding blame, and that's something that I have to recognize too. Is I got very good at being manipulative in very subtle ways, and so this is something that I have to recognize. It didn't ever make me feel good. I didn't like it, but I was very afraid of being reprimanded by somebody else because I didn't want them to mirror back to me what it was that I had just done. I was more afraid of that feeling than I was of like the residual guilt of sitting with myself. And I still have a lot of residual guilt for things that a lot of people probably would consider to be small, but I don't really care what they think about it, to be honest. Although if people are less affected emotionally by those sort of childhood acts, I'm happy about that. But also I do recognize that stuff, those are formative years, and even something like a playground dispute that can have a serious effect on someone's development, and it can change. That could be a traumatic event for them. So I do feel really bad about that kind of stuff. And I learned, I guess, like early on, from when I was a kid, I learned that I could use like physical. I remember there's one time, this first time this probably ever happened was when I was in first grade. There's this kid that I had never really hung out with him before, but we were like playing together on the playground for some reason. His name was Sean Young, and
I remember that name.
he did something that made me really uncomfortable. I got like a really weird vibe from that kid, and I still do. This was in first grade, so I was not like acting out angrily at this point.
No, you were crying a lot.
I was crying a lot.
A lot of crying.
But this kid, he was like trying to like hold my hands up against like a fence or something.
You told me this incident.
It was really weird, and I got super uncomfortable, and I started to run away, and he was like chasing me, being like, "Hey, wait, no." And I turned around in the middle of the playground, and like without even thinking about it, my leg flew up, and I snap kicked him right in the face, and he fell back.
You told me. You cried.
I didn't even know that could have happened. I was like, I didn't know I had that kind of flexibility. I was very, very like shocked that I did that. And it didn't hurt him too much. He actually kind of grinned about it in the class later as he raised his hand. Miss Haas Colby kicked me on the playground.
I was told about that when I came to pick you up, and you felt so bad.
I did feel really bad.
Cried.
But it's a dualistic thing, because while I did feel really bad, it also empowered me, and it made me feel like I could use physical violence to enact a sense of power. Mm-hmm. Although there was a very big frontal part of me that hated that and really didn't like that.
Well, because you were seeing that at home.
Mm-hmm. But there was a part of me too that was like, that thought of myself as weak and defenseless, and it's like, well, if I'm not as weak as defenseless as I think I am, so like, hey, maybe I could start leaning into that if I really feel sad, if I feel sad, maybe I could lean into this physical violent part of myself, and maybe that'll make the sad feelings go away. It's kind of like the thought process that I had. Mm-hmm. Because I was very tired of being so emotionally vulnerable in front of people all the time and having them not understand it, and I guess it seemed to me as though physical violence was a more socially acceptable way of
for
enacting
males,
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't do this very often. I could probably count on my hands the amount of times I've ever gotten into a fight, and like I said, it pretty much stopped when I was in seventh grade, because when I was in seventh grade, clearly my brain and my ego developed to a point where I decided to put all that behind me, and I just stopped doing it. And then I found different ways to resolve my issues. I started to laugh a lot more. I also started to become more reclusive at that point, and I stopped really engaging with people at all. In fact, actually, my response to that was to counteract completely and just not even engage with people, really.
I know.
Because I yet again, there was still a part of me that was really afraid of myself. So I was like, it probably is better if I just don't really talk to anyone at all. Because when I do talk to people, I usually either cry or I get angry. And so it's like, I don't really want to do either of those things. I'd rather just be by myself. People trigger me really easily. That was what I thought at the time.
Yep.
Really, I just triggered myself really easily. Yeah.
It's so interesting how you've worked through so much, because, I mean, you told me a lot of this along the way because I would ask you. And I knew your emotions, and whenever you were around me, you would begin to cry and open up because you knew that you were safe with me and that I would support you and I would never judge you and that I never called you out on any of that. Like the things that you told me that happened at the elementary school before you went to Odyssey, I never talked with your teachers about any of that. I said to you, we talked about what you were feeling. We talked about your feelings. We talked about your thoughts. We talked about, I would give you solutions of how to deal with kids like that. And we would deal with it within ourselves, so that when I was asked during parent-teacher conferences, There's only one time, I can't remember which teacher it was, but said, I think Colby had an altercation with a kid on the playground. I said, and I named him out. I think it was a Sean kid. I named him out and I said, yes, Colby told me about it. And she said, oh, good. I kind of figured that you two had a good communication because you seem very connected with him. And I was a room mother, so I was present in the room so often. And I said, Colby tells me most things. I said, my kids tell me, I'm never going to claim that my kids tell me everything. I don't think anybody ever tells anybody anything. Everyone has a secret world, period. There's a secret self to everybody that you never tell anybody. Mm-hmm. And I said, but Colby tells me most things. And I said, I would tell your teachers this, I'm also psychic and I can totally tune in. They never batted an eye at any of that. When I'd say I'm a psychic and I can tell what my kids are going through and I can sense it and I will verbalize it to them. And I said, and I always reassure my children that this is normal human behavior. The teachers were always so impressed with that. And that was how we were able to work with you in the class as gracefully as we did. We also realized, and I've talked about this with you before, one of the reasons why, in particular at that elementary school, that you were so emotional and getting into fights, not only because your father's and my marriage was awful at that point, but number two, you weren't being intellectually stimulated at that school. And that's why I switched you to the Odyssey program, is because you needed more intellectual stimulation. Mm-hmm. You needed something that was going to be fun for you to focus on. And when you got into Odyssey, everything changed.
Well, also, I have to say the culture at Odyssey was a big shift for me. It was really different. And beyond even just like the classroom stuff, which at that point I was already pretty much dreading. Every time I was dreading adapting to a new classroom situation. Every time I changed grades, I was dreading it. I would always dread being in a new room.
I know.
I would dread having to learn new subjects. I was dreading all of that stuff.
I know you were.
But actually what really got me interested in Odyssey was that all of the kids that I was around who were both in Hayhurst and in Odyssey, like as soon as I entered 5th grade, they were so much more like adults than any of the kids at Maplewood. It was crazy. They were using cuss words I had never even dreamed of using, and talking about things I had never even fathomed talking about.
They were reading books that were way beyond their years.
Completely like opened me up to being like, oh yeah, now it's time to like start to grow up a little bit. And actually that feeling was kind of thrilling. And I very much enjoyed being a part of a culture that was more of like, more what I viewed as adult, which was getting to talk about more taboo subjects.
And that's one of the reasons why I put you in that school, because once you got into the 6-8 program with Damon and Rothwell, and I forgot the one who was brought in then, they treated you like you were an adult, all of you like you were adults. They gave you material that challenged you. They challenged you guys. They continue to. They challenged all three of you going through that program. You were expected to do work that was in an upper high school level. In 6-8, you had the same teachers 3 years in a row. You were with the same kids. You were all the kids were at an intellectual level that all of these other schools couldn't handle. You and your siblings were always at an intellectual level that a lot of other kids were not at, and that's why the school was perfect for you.
And I remember that actually I did really get into the curriculum. In 6-8, I would say I was the most academically focused that I've ever been in my life. Aside from getting out of school, I've been very academic since leaving school.
Yeah, since graduating high school, of course, because it's self-learning, it's easier. But that school stimulated you on an intellectual level.
I was actually interested in the subjects. I was actually interested in. I did my homework.
You loved the field studies.
I was very invested in learning, and I even wish to this day, that I had taken a little bit more advantage of it. I wish I had gone and done the plays, for example. I wasn't quite ready. I was too uncomfortable. But I think that just the amount of experiences that were offered there were really good. And I will say, just kind of cap off like the school thing. When I went to high school, I remember within the first week of being in high school, there was, and this didn't really happen very often. I think this is the only time that this happened when I was in all of high school, at least for like my class group. There was a fight between two kids that happened in one of the bathrooms. And I remember being like, just kind of like morbidly curious and being like, I guess like let's see what's going on here. I hadn't really witnessed a lot of fights from like a third person perspective, aside from like on the bus, which in like Odyssey, which fights happen all the time
All
on
the
the
time.
bus. But it was kind of like it almost didn't feel so consequential then because it just I don't know, it seemed more comical and and it was more just like it felt like cathartic, I guess. That bus experience was crazy. There was so much rage and anger and preteen emotions, and our bus driver Annie was yelling at us all the time, 24/7.
She had such a hard time with you guys. I talked with her. She had such a hard time with you guys.
Yeah.
I felt so for her.
I do now. I thought that she was a Nazi when I was that age.
You guys called her a Nazi, and I actually had some decent conversations with her. She really cared about you guys.
Yeah.
She was super passionate about kids.
Yeah.
And about teenagers, and she really loved you guys. And she was like, she goes, oh no, she's like, I'm the warden. Come on. She was like yelling at you guys all the time.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Sit down.
Yeah.
She'd have to stop the bus.
She did that a lot. She stopped the bus all the time. That was a regular occurrence. Yeah. No, I really value that experience. But I remember when I got into high school and there was this fight that occurred between these two kids that I didn't even really know very well. One of them I ended up hanging out with a bunch throughout those years. But we you know, it was very stereotypical. Like we all went to like the guy's bathroom and they were like gonna fight in the bathroom. And I actually remember it was kind of a turning point for me because I watched them like fight. It was a very quick fight. They were like really throwing punches at each other. I remember just like watching it and I just felt kind of sick. And I left and I was like, oh, it was not a very entertaining experience. I was like, I felt like kind of sick watching that. And I think that
you told me about that the next day. You told me the whole thing, and because I asked you, I said, so why did you do it? You said I was curious. I said, oh, what'd you learn? You told me you felt sick.
Yeah, I didn't. I felt really bad, and I think that was when I was like, I completely put physical violence behind me as like, this is not something that I ever want to do again, because just to witness from a third person perspective it happening and then to combine that with my own feelings that would come up after I would engage that sort of thing, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the emotional weight. It wasn't worth the emotional distress. And so I guess that's one example of like changing a part of myself and accepting, because in giving that up, I gave up a negative coping mechanism that was really just one of the layers that I built to protect my sensitivity. So I was coming to accept my own sensitivity and my own passivity, because I'm naturally somebody who is more of like a pacifist, and so I guess I came closer to accepting that. But I had to change a part of myself to do that. So that was the reason why I brought that up, is to kind of highlight what we're talking about here.
Okay, now we're recording. Okay, so we're going to continue this for the audio podcast, and the videos are still going. The videos got all of however long that was. I'm guessing that's at least like a half an hour. But what I want to get into, and I want to dive into more, and let's just dive into this more since we're going to be putting this on just audio only podcast platforms. What I want to dive into more here is we're talking about accepting your personality. We're talking about getting comfortable with yourself. And you just relayed an amazing story about learning about these more intense aspects of your personality from a very young age. And I'm catching up all of our audio podcasters on this. If you want to see the first part of this, go to our YouTube channel, One Long Conversation on YouTube, so that you can see the first part that we totally messed up and didn't record that part on the audio. What I want to go into here more, because what I touched on is when I've been hearing the feedback in my life from a very young age, and Colby you just shared the feedback that you were getting, when I put out into the world the extremes of my personality, in the past, I didn't like it. And what we just touched on earlier that I want to get in the recording is you can change your personality. And here's a little piece that I want to touch on. As an astrologer, when people come to me for a consult, or it just comes up in my sessions, if we're talking about astrology and their chart, people ask me, can you change your astrology? You can't change the latitude and longitude of where you're born. You cannot change the progressions. You cannot change the transits. But what you can change is how you behave through them, how you express them. So my hearing in my life that you're so intense. Yeah, I love, here's a really great component to that. Deborah Silverman. Love that astrologer. Love her. If you guys have not heard Deborah Silverman, please go to Deborah.
She's great.
Go to Deborah Silverman. We love Deborah Silverman. She's a fellow Gemini for me. She's a Libra rising, moon in Aries. She is brilliant, amazing. I would love to guest or have her as a guest on our podcast. I would love to guest on her podcast as well. The I Don't Believe in Astrology podcast is her podcast. I got to plug her because
that's such a good name.
It is such a great name, and I listened to that podcast. I'm one of the subscribers. Love her. She's so funny when she's, and she likes to speak in third party. Said the Gemini. You talk too much, said the Gemini, or the astrologer said the astrologer. Well, when she talks about people coming to her as well and asking her, can I change my astrology? Can I change my chart? You can't change your chart, but you can change how you express different aspects of yourself. She also has been on a long journey and has came to it. And I don't know how many years ago she came to this, but I heard her talking about this on her podcast and just on her Instagram and her YouTube channels that I listen to and I watch, that she's learned to love the Gemini in her. She's learned to love the moon in Aries. She's learned to love that her Mercury and Taurus needs to control things in the communication realm. She's learned to love all these different aspects of herself and celebrate them. I have also learned to love these things about myself. When people say, oh, you're a Gemini, oh, you're two-faced, somebody's got to be two-faced.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Source wants to learn through me. You poke fun at it. You bring the humor into it. And I've learned to do that. So here's where it comes in when people say to me, you're so dramatic. Well, Deborah Silverman would say, if she had my chart, well, my God, Jupiter 29 degrees in Leo. Of course you're going to be dramatic.
Yeah.
There's no way to get out of that.
Yeah.
So, do the best with it. Let's look at Robin Williams and how over the top that man was. But he banked on it. Totally celebrated it. He ran with it. He took an extreme aspect of his personality and learned to touch the masses with the extremes of it. Extreme humor, extreme over-the-top drama, extreme manic, and then extreme depressive by winning Oscars with that extreme depressive of being so sad that water trine. And his first sun, rising, and moon in all the water signs. And he learned to take that and go, I'm going to bring in the full dramatic spectrum of the human emotion, and I'm going to bring that to humans because everybody can relate to this. I've learned to do that with my personality. I talk a lot. I am walking Mercury. Mercury rules my chart. I'm the oracle. And I'm the dramatic oracle. And I'm the diarrhea of the mouth oracle. And I'm the intense sun. Jupiter 29 degrees in Leo. In the whole sign system in the 12th house. I can use that in order to bring brightness into healing and into generational healing. Into religion, which goddess knows religion so needs that. So to celebrate my personality instead of going, oh my gosh, she's a Libra. Why can't I be more like her? Because I'm not a Libra. Mm-hmm. I only have South Node in Libra. It's not very dominant. Mm-hmm. It gets overshadowed by all the other aspects.
Nor is it supposed to be dominant.
No. So learning to accept that I'm huge. I talk like an Italian person. I'm very loud and I use a lot of hand signals. Uh-huh. It's just the way I am. I like having a lot of big inflection when I talk. I talk loud. I have a loud voice. I have a strong tone. I can come, here's the big one. I'm gonna look at the camera when I say this. I can be intimidating. I've heard that. Oh, you intimidate her. Really? Do I? What's intimidating about me? Oh, you're so self-assured. Oh, is that it? My intimidation is because I'm self-assured.
That's pretty crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
So,
that's pretty wild.
To learn to laugh about yourself, it took me a long time to do that. And I used humor as a wonderful tool to share with the world, yeah, this is my personality. I was created by Source to be overly expressive, to see what that feels like. What kind of knowledge can I get from being overly expressive, from being loud, from being extreme, from being too giving, from being super, I'm a very nurturing person to the point where I'm like almost, I'm enabling. And it's like, I have to learn how to not be enabling by, okay, I'm going to stand here and watch you fall on your ass. How did that feel for you? I mean, I did that with all three of you. You're the one who came in, you come running down the driveway in the townhouse, and you're like, Mommy. And this is when Mars was Marissa. You better come. Marissa needs your help. What's going on? She's stuck in the tree. And here's Mars hanging by the right forearm like this, and he's got the big-eyed look, and it's just looking at me and like almost no expression, like, I'm fucked. Would you please come and get me? And I literally, in the tree, it's not an easy tree to climb up. And I go up and I literally go underneath Mars. And I'm like lifting Mars up. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like holding Mars's weight. And I'm like, we're not going to the hospital today. Mommy doesn't have insurance. And I'm literally like slipping Mars's forearm up out of the V wedge between the thing. And Mars is because Mars did not cry really easily like that. And I'm like, oh, honey. Mars is like, and I said, Mommy's got you. And I carry Mars down into the house and immediately ice arnica and homeopathic pellets in the mouth. And that's when I'm looking at Mars, and Mars is just like big-eyed. And that's when I'm like, it's okay. I've got you. Mommy's got you. And then it's like, yeah, I know. I mean, all of those things, those are characteristics of, you want to fall on your butt? Well, this is what's going to happen. And then I didn't say to Mars after that, okay, you fell on your ass. Literally, you almost broke your ulna and your radius bones and your forearm. Don't do that again. I never did that to you guys. Don't do that again. What did I say to you? I would say, you're going to climb up the tree again. Be more aware of how you climb up the tree, how you got there, and be more aware of how you're going to get down safely, because we don't have any medical insurance, and I'm not taking you to the hospital.
That's so good.
I always did that with you guys. Okay, you're gonna continue to go on your scooter down this long, steep driveway, and you're gonna continue to slam into the garage. I'm not going to tell you not to do that, because you're a kid. You're going to continue to do it because it's fun until you slam your head in the garage. Just don't get a concussion while you're doing that. How can you go down the driveway and land in a different way? Can you put a bunch of cushions outside? And you would say to me, can we bring cushions outside? Sure, you can bring cushions outside. And you would say to me, oh, I didn't know we could bring cushions outside. Of course you can. We have cushions, but I thought those were supposed to be nice. We have a house full of kids. We can buy new cushions. Go bring the cushions outside. That was the kind of parent I always was. Go bring the cushions outside. And then you were like to Mars, let's go get the cushions. Okay. And then then it was a way for you guys to have a lot of fun and still be safe. And then I could continue to make dinner in the house without going, oh my God, now the kids are in here and they'd rather be outside playing. I always found some sort of solution to the issue. But I would say to you, be more aware when you're doing it so that you don't hurt yourself and you can still have fun in the process of doing something that's maybe a little bit dangerous. Mars always wanted to hang around on that steel handhold of the cement steps going down into the street. And Mars fell forward and smacked the forehead so badly on that at age 4. And I literally picked Mars up, and Mars was just like in shock, had a slight concussion and a goose egg. And again, ice, homeopathy, arnica montana, all of that. And then I didn't say to Mars, don't go back out there on the handrail. I knew, because when I was Mars's age, I was going to go back out there on the handrail. I was the one who's climbing the roofs. I was the one who's climbing the top of the tree. I'm not going to tell you guys not to do those things. Instead, I'm going to be like, how can you sit on top of that handrail and take care of yourself better? How can you be safer with that? And it's interesting when I gave Mars permission to do that, Mars was like, I don't think I want to go on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I noticed that ways of, and I'm mentioning all of this stuff because I noticed that the ways that I could work with my own personality, I didn't want to restrict my personality. That never feels good for me to restrict my personality. But I learned through self-love that I wanted to facilitate for others, especially my loved ones, that I was going to use my personality in a way that would offer fun and solutions. And then I noticed that when I did that, tweaking my personality, when I did that, not only did you guys have more fun, but it made me feel better. And so when you're talking about your school years and fighting kids, which wasn't very often, but when you did, it was a big deal.
Yeah, it cemented itself in my memory for sure.
It cemented itself in your memory that violence is definitely not a path that you want to go down. And you got that example at home, and you got that example in school, and you got that example with your friends, which is a very Aries lesson. Very Aries. I also had the same lesson.
And also Pluto and Sag.
Pluto and Sag will do it. I have an Aries stellium in some of the harder, more detrimental planets in the 8th house, house of death and taxes. I had to learn from a very young age when we were made fun of for being preacher's kids. I was very small. I had a very small body. And people underestimated my size with my strength. My sister was the victim. They picked on her. She was larger than me physically. She did not have a strong spirit at all, which is why she succumbed to non-smoker's lung cancer forever ago. I found that I had this massive temper and a level of impatience that would put a cow down. And I was like, I didn't like that. I did not like that at all. But I learned to use my fierceness as a way to help the victim. I was almost like set up by universe to see my sister as the victim in how to help her. And in the early years, I would use violence in order to help her. I learned that that didn't work very well. I didn't like the way it made me feel that I had to jump on kids' backs and beat the heck out of them, and they were shocked. I was like a horsefly that was just attacking them. I didn't like that feeling. They never saw me coming. It wasn't a lot. Same with your situation.
Never heard anyone compare themselves to a horsefly.
I was like attacking and relentless, and I've shared with you so many times, I haven't been attacked too many times physically in this life. And I have said to universe, no more. Nobody's attacking me anymore. I don't need to be attacked. But when I have been attacked, something happens. And I become a superhero. And I get very fierce. I become very, very masculine. And I become very defensive. And my body becomes a weapon. And this body has never been raped. This body has never been killed. It's been attempted. And it's never happened. Because there is this relentless power that comes out. I have learned through those experiences that I don't need to go there anymore. I've learned through those experiences that is not necessary for me to have a happy life. And so I have decided that I'm going to focus on the more joyous aspects of my personality, laughter and fun and social connection and the ability to bring people together and the drama in a fun way. I have learned, and selfless service and helping people, being empathic and empathetic, being understanding, facilitating a space for people in order to feel safe. Those are aspects of my personality. Creating structure for you three and other people's children, because I was a nanny for a long time before I had you kids. Creating a safety structure for others. These are the things in my personality that I've brought out. And I'm sharing all of this because we can change our personalities. We can focus on the most positive aspects of our personalities, and we can become very conscious and make conscious choice to put out the most loving aspects of ourselves, because the rewards of that are beyond what we can even imagine.